Today, we're diving into some fantastic research material from Dr. Sudheendra S G, put together especially for educators. We're going to tackle a really interesting question. How did video games make that huge leap from the noisy arcades right into our living rooms? We're heading back to the 1970s to find that first spark that lit up the entire industry. So let's jump right in. So yeah, how did it all happen? How did we go from just a simple blinking dot on a TV screen to this massive multi-billion-dollar cultural force we see today? That's the big question we're unpacking. We're going to look at the inventor who's often forgotten, the corporate giant that totally rewrote the rules, and a creative rebellion that, well, it started a revolution.
Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we'll talk about the actual first console. It's a story a lot of people get wrong. Then we'll see how Atari came in and just changed everything. That, of course, leads us to some rebels who broke away, this surprising invasion from Japan, and finally, we'll wrap up with what this wild decade can really teach us today.
All right, let's get into our first section. If you ask most people, they'll say the story of home gaming starts with one company, Atari. But that's not the whole story. The real beginning was with this brilliant engineer who saw the future like decades before anyone else did.
And it is so important to get these two pioneers straight in your head. On one side, you've got Ralph Baer. People call him the father of video games. He's the inventor, the guy who dreamt up the whole concept. Then on the other side, there's Nolan Bushnell, the father of the video game industry. He was the entrepreneur who figured out how to package that idea and sell it to the world. So think of it like this. One guy created the spark and the other turned it into a wildfire.
And just look at this timeline. It really shows you how ridiculously far ahead of his time Ralph Baer was. He first had this idea way back in 1951. Can you believe that? The world just wasn't ready. It took another 15 years when TVs were finally in pretty much every home for him to even revisit the idea. That led to his famous brown box prototype and eventually the world's very first home console in 1972. And this console, the Magnavox Odyssey, was honestly so revolutionary. It didn't have cartridges like we think of today. No software. Instead, you'd physically slot in these things called game cards that literally rewired the circuits inside to play a different game. It even came with one of the first light guns. And get this, it's the reason we all used to connect our consoles to the TV on channel 3 or 4. That standard lasted for decades. Okay, so the Odyssey was the pioneer, no doubt. But it was Atari that really poured gasoline on the fire. When they launched the legendary 2600, well, the living room was just never gonna be the same again. The jump from the Odyssey to the Atari 2600 was just massive. I mean, we're talking way better graphics, actual color, and of course, those iconic joysticks. But the single most important innovation, the absolute masterstroke, was the interchangeable game cartridge. All of a sudden, one console wasn't just for one game. It was a gateway to an entire library of games. That was the real game changer. But behind the scenes at Atari, there was this really controversial policy brewing. Management basically saw their game designers as anonymous cogs in a machine. They completely refused to give them any public credit for the games they were creating. And let me tell you, that decision was about to backfire in a big way. So feeling frustrated and totally unrecognized, a programmer named Warren Robinett decided he was going to rebel, in secret. In his amazing game adventure, he programmed a hidden room, one that was nearly impossible to find. And what was inside? His own name. It was like a digital signature, a protest against being invisible. And in doing that, he created the very first Easter egg in a video game, a tradition that is absolutely alive and well today. And this is what players eventually discovered. Can you just imagine the thrill? Stumbling across a secret message from the creator himself, buried deep inside the game's code. It was such a powerful statement about creativity and the person behind the program. But Robinett's secret message? Well, that was just the start. The frustration bubbling up inside Atari was about to boil over into a full-on rebellion that would end up reshaping the entire industry. So several of Atari's absolute best designers just walked out. They didn't just find new jobs, they started their own company called Activision. And by doing that, they basically invented a concept we totally take for granted today, the third-party developer, a company that makes games for a console they didn't build. The entire modern video game industry is built on this idea, and it all started right here with them. And right around the same time, a new challenger stepped into the ring.
The toy giant Mattel launched its Intellivision in 1979. It had better graphics, better sound, and their marketing was, well, it was ruthless. They ran TV ads that directly compared their games side by side with Atari's. This was the beginning of the very first console war.
And Mattel wasn't just fighting for the living room. Look at this number, 500,000. By 1978, that's how many of their simple handheld electronic games, like that classic football one, they were selling every single week. This was proof that there was this huge, untapped market for gaming on the go, and it totally set the stage for future icons like the Game Boy. But while all these American companies were busy fighting each other, a new power was rising in the East. A massive creative wave was building in Japan, and it was about to change everything.
The first wave of this invasion hit in 1978. Space Invaders, which was designed by a Japanese company called Taito, wasn't just a hit arcade game, it was a cultural earthquake. It got so popular in Japan that it actually caused a nationwide shortage of 100 yen coins. The entire world was hooked, and everyone knew this game had to come home.
So Atari made a brilliant move and secured the exclusive home rights. And when Space Invaders launched for the 2600, the result was just explosive. Sales of the console quadrupled. They went up 4 times. This was the birth of what we now call the killer app, a piece of software so good, so essential that people would buy an entire system just to play it. It proved that bringing the biggest arcade hits home was the key to winning the living room.
So let's wrap this all up. Looking back at this foundational decade, what are the big lessons here for educators? Well, Dr. Sudheendra's research really boils it all down to a few powerful ideas that are still incredibly relevant.
So 4 core lessons really stand out. First, innovation needs accessibility. Baer's idea was amazing in the 50s, but it only took off when TVs were in every home. Second, user experience is everything. The 2600 won because it was just more convenient and more fun. Third, recognition fuels creativity. When Atari treated its developers like they were invisible, those developers left and started a creative revolution. And finally, global collaboration pushes everyone to be better. A Japanese game on an American console created this huge success that benefited everybody.
So the 1970s built the entire foundation, the hardware, the business models, even the first real global hits. The stage was set. But one huge question remained. What would it take to go beyond just simple pixels on a screen and create a true global icon, a character and a company that could truly conquer the world? Well, we'll find out as we look at the rise of Nintendo and Sega.